today Netflix made some more waves because they officially announced Francis Ngannou has been added to the Gina Carano Ronda Rousey card on May the 16th, and he will be taking on, way they got him, Felipe Lins, former PFL heavyweight champion, tournament winner, former UFC light heavyweight, who is now returning to heavyweight for this fight, will fight Francis Ngannou. Lins, age 40, is 18-5. Actually won his last 4 fights in the UFC, and they just did not renew his contract. They could not come to any agreement, so he hasn't fought for 2 years. So he will get the ring rust knocked out of him on May the 16th, and so it's a notable signing here of adding Francis Ngannou to this card. He put out a video post hinting at the potential that this could set up a fight with him and Jake Paul. I mean, certainly, sure. Always possible. I mean, this is basically what this is now. It's just creating these insane fights.
Okay, like, are they even like 3 classes within each other? Like 3 weight classes within each other?
Yeah, I mean, Jake fights at like, God, I feel he has not fought above like 185 as a boxer, off the top of my head.
And how much does Ngannou weigh?
I mean, Ngannou is a fully fledged heavyweight. He will cut down to 265.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, sure.
There's a little size discrepancy there. Ronda Rousey tweets out, "How's that for a BAMF laden double headliner?" I'm just imagining Ronda saying this word, a BAMF laden double headliner. That's what happens when you put fighters and fans ahead of shareholders. P.S. In case you didn't get the subtlety, UFC's White House card sucks.
Middle finger emoji.
She just wants it very, very clear that no one is mincing words here. This fight got its own fair share of criticism itself. So let's not pretend this is the fans first type of matchmaking either. But they are building a spectacle for May 16th. I mean, having Francis Ngannou, who is the lineal UFC heavyweight champion, he does add a spectacle element to this card. And they are doing a press conference on Tuesday in California with all of these parties present for the promotion of that. But it's been a very interesting couple of days for the UFC with the reveal of the White House card. And the reaction to it has... Like, I cannot recall a time that the UFC fan base is just starting to, like, it's very comparable, I think, to a lot of the WWE fan base at some, especially in this lead up to WrestleMania, that they are seeing that here is TKO, that is a company that is not going to over leverage itself to create the biggest possible fights it can. And this has become cost-effective fighting, and the fans are seeing this, and there is all of this vocal dissent toward it. And you've had this fallout from Saturday where Jon Jones is furious at the company and Dana White's portrayal of how the negotiations went, and basically stating that Jon Jones was never going to fight on this card, while at the same time acknowledging that that his team was negotiating with Jon Jones. So that really doesn't square up at all. And, reportedly, Ariel Helwani had indicated that. So last year, Jon Jones was reportedly offered about $30 million to fight Tom Aspinall. He did not take the fight, and that might be a choice that he will one day live to regret. It sounds like for this fight, according to Ariel Helwani, he wanted similar money for this fight, and they were willing to go to like $15 million for Jon Jones. And obviously, the fight was not made. And it becomes this interesting domino effect because that Conor Benn signing, I think, has woken up a lot of fighters, and mainly your biggest fighters, that if you are pricing a Conor Benn as worth $15 million, well, a Jon Jones is worth a hell of a lot more than a Conor Benn is. Conor McGregor is worth. A Ilya Topuria is worth. I mean, you can go down the list. There are a lot of people in the UFC that derive a lot more business for this company than Conor Benn does. And now you have set this standard that's, I think, going to be very, very tough for some of these fighters to stomach. But the number that everyone should be looking at from Saturday night is the UFC 236 card that still did an $8.3 million gate at the T-Mobile Arena. And when the UFC is doing gates like that, they are not incentivized to spend above and beyond. They are getting paid the exact same amount from Paramount for this White House card. They have no gate to make any of this money back, and they've outright stated we're going to lose $30 million. So what, we're going to lose another $15 million by paying Jon Jones $30 million? This is just the reality. And in a competitive marketplace, one of those pressure points would be your fan base rejecting these fights that you're saving money by presenting. But that's not happening. Like, there is discontent, but it's from an audience that is not paying to go to these shows, because the ones that are spending incredible amounts, and they have this guaranteed deal with Paramount. So it's very similar, I find, way to WWE, where there is a lot, like we hear of a lot of discontent, but this is still, like, even in a softer WrestleMania than last year, it's going to be among the biggest combat sports gates in history next month that they are still going to benefit from. And that incentive to change, it's not an economic incentive for either company.
It's not felt yet. Doesn't mean that this might not be laying the groundwork for it to be felt later.
Yeah.
But at present time, these companies are still hot. These tickets are still hot. Just simply the brand name of either WWE or UFC are enough to drive, whatever interest there may be. But there is, I think you can't ignore audience discontent, especially when it's been as vocal and I think as obvious as, like, you never want to hear a promoter, like, not that they're excusing it, but they're not exactly like arguing against the idea that they're putting these cards together because they are cost effective. To me, somebody, like, speaking as someone who hasn't, like, really followed MMA in quite a while, I don't know if there's an attempt to bring back somebody like me to watch this UFC like White House event, but the lineup certainly is not necessarily inspiring. Like, it to me is lacking a certain level of star power that I might even be tempted, to check out. So what is the aim? What is the goal with a show like this?
I think for a show like this, I think what they are looking at for is the biggest audience possible that they can get on whatever combination of CBS and subscribers to Paramount Plus. I think that's certainly the objective that CBS wants out of this, is to get subscribers to their service. And for the UFC, they clearly look at this White House event as a gigantic promotional tool for the company. They believe that the attention they're going to receive on that week, on that day, is invaluable. And it's worth losing $30 million over, because our brand is going to be exposed at such a high level to the entire country. Whether that happens or not, we're not going to know. But a year from now, will we look back and say, wow, that White House card was a turning point moment for the UFC, where it just exploded with so many more people watching this card that happened on the White House. I think that's their objective long term.
So this is arguably one of the biggest platforms they'll ever have for one of their events, correct?
Yeah, you could certainly argue. Like, this is the only time they're ever going to have a card on the White House lawn. I can say that pretty safely.
So you have the platform. Is it not important to have a card that matches that stature?
Listen, I would argue that you would want both. That you have this big stage and you want to put on the biggest fight possible. But here is, like, Francis Ngannou is a perfect example. Like, here is the guy that you want to revive this heavyweight division. You're throwing everything you can to sign this guy. And I don't think anyone expected that. Like, that is where, like, the UFC is not in the business anymore of putting on the biggest fights possible. It's, if it makes sense, we will book that fighter, but it might not be against the opponent you're looking to see against. And, a Francis Ngannou outside of the UFC, like, this is the end result. Like, there's not a whole slew of heavyweights out there to match him with, and you get Felipe Lins. And that was the PFL's problem. It was like, we've got this guy, but how can we make any of this money back on pay-per-view? We have no one to match this guy against that any public is going to pay for to see this guy fight. And there's very few
that
fighters
changes now. They've got Jake Paul. They've got Ronda Rousey, so they could do Francis Ngannou, Ronda Rousey at some point, I'm sure.
All options on the table whenever they decide to return to Netflix. But
Mike Tyson, maybe,
he's
getting there.
He wants to fight Floyd this year. So, there's
Floyd. There's another one.
So the latest from Jon Jones is that he put out, well, first he did his classic tweeting his frustrations and then deleting all of his tweets, but today did put out a message stating that I'm not on the White House card, but let's clear something up. My team and I were actually negotiating with the UFC for that fight. Real negotiations. I even came down from my original number. And what was I offered in return? I was lowballed. Yes, I have arthritis in my hip, and it's painful, but that doesn't mean I can't fight. So let me get this straight. If I had accepted the lowball offer, suddenly my hip would be fine and I'd be on the White House card? That doesn't make sense. I even received stem cell treatment last week to get ready for the White House card, and training camp was scheduled to start today. I was preparing to be ready. I understand business deals fall through sometimes, but going out publicly and saying things that aren't true isn't right. After everything I've given to the UFC, the years, the title defenses, the fights, hearing that I'm done is disappointing, especially when as recently as Friday, UFC was calling me, trying to get me on that White House card for a much lower number. If the UFC truly feels like I'm done, then I respectfully ask to be released from my contract today. No more spins, no more games. Thank you to the real fans who know what's up. Bones out. Just how Wei also ends some of his text messages. It's really out of left field. Listen, I can certainly say a lot of critical things about Jon Jones throughout his career outside of the cage. He is not wrong in any of this that he has outlined here. And, for anyone that's looking at, this is a guy that for whatever reasons, he walked away from like $30 million last year. But is that guy under the pay-per-view model, was he worth the amount he was asking for? Yes, he was. And this is also like your Jon Jones and Conor McGregor. They have never had less leverage here because now pay-per-view is not a aspect that the UFC is profiting from. Certainly Paramount would want a Jon Jones or a Conor McGregor, but for the UFC, it's like we're guaranteed this $7.7 billion, whether we have Jon Jones for 5 fights over the term of this deal or 0 Jon Jones fights or 0 Conor McGregor fights. And these guys, like they all, whatever you look at what they have made, they are grossly underpaid. But at Jon Jones being released, that's not going to happen either because then Netflix has another discontent or disgruntled ex-UFC fighter, and I don't think they're going to be looking to cut Jon Jones either.
How do these contracts work? Like a guy agrees to X amount of fights. I guess he gets to negotiate the price of each one of those fights. Is that what?
For a period, and we'd have to look at the specifics of Jon Jones contracts, but there was a period where the sunset clauses were built in, where it meant that even if you don't get your contracted amount of fights, there is this date, like December 31st, 2026, we either reach and give you all the fights you're owed, or when that date comes, you're free to go. And that's how Ngannou got to leave as champion. They used to have the champions clause so they could prevent champions from leaving. Now, over the last few years, those sunset clauses have been like disappearing from contracts. And what happens is that if I go to you and, hey, we want you to fight random XYZ, and you can't take that fight for whatever reason, or you don't want that fight, or you're hurt, I can tack on time to your contract. And these contracts can just go on and if you're owed, Conor McGregor has had 2 fights remaining on his deal. He has not fought since July of 2021, and he's still under contract. So he still owes them fights. And think about, and I'm not even advocating, I could care less if a Conor McGregor fights again. I think that's, a lot of people are upset he's not on this White House card. There's an aspect, like this guy, of like what he was found civilly liable for, fighting on the White House card. I'm sorry, I'm not holding my breath needing to ever see a Conor McGregor fight at this point. But again, he's been under contract this whole time, and he would be a massive figure for a Netflix or anybody to be going out and doing these stunt fights, and he can't contractually. And like these guys are just locked to these deals. Like George St. Pierre retired and years later revealed he was like still under contract when he was talking about like a boxing fight. So it's like they are very, very restrictive.
Right. And so if they don't meet at a place where they're happy enough with the amount of money that is being paid to the fighter, then the fighter just won't fight for potentially eternity.
Yeah,
well, so what's to stop him from offering Jon Jones $1 to fight for the rest of his career?
I mean, your contract calls for a certain amount. It's not like
a base amount.
Yeah.
Okay, so but Jon Jones wants more than his base, and he's allowed to ask for that. Like, why aren't they just paying him his base and being like, "Fuck, you agreed to this. Like, you have to fight for this."
I mean, you can't force a guy to fight, and Jon Jones is clearly looking at like this was a lowball offer, and it's if you were negotiating last year,
then.
Well, I mean it's a fair point, but it's like when was this deal signed as well? And if you were
he signed it.
Well, it's ultimately Jon Jones'
I'm not saying
choice.
It's fair, but he shouldn't have signed it. I mean, and again, like you're getting to different territory, but like what's right and what's not.
But that goes to a marketplace way that like several years ago when you didn't even have like if you are a Jon Jones and you don't really have a whole lot of other options then as a professional fighter of where you are going to go. So So
let's say theoretically UFC wants to ice Jon Jones for the rest of his career. All they have to do is offer this base level that he's agreed to in his contract. And
they can just offer him like they're contractually obligated to offer him a fight. But I mean, Jones himself was like at talking about like he was retired, but it's. Yeah, UFC does technically have to offer him fights every year, but not at $30 million and not at $15 million. So, I mean, this is typically this just becomes a stalemate between fighters. And I think there's a decent shot. Like you will not see Jon Jones compete again unless there is some break from his UFC contract. Like I could see him never fighting for the UFC again at this point. The Post Wrestling Cafe is your one-stop shop for all of the coverage that Post Wrestling has to offer. 2 big rewind-aways this month with WWF Insurrection from May of 2002. This UK-only pay-per-view featured the Raw brand going overseas and ending with the infamous plane ride from hell. Then we're going to take a look at AWA's Super Sunday from April of 1983. A new edition of Talk Can Be Yours, plus MCU Later, Book Club, and coverage of UFC 326, TNA Sacrifice, and of course, XL editions of Rewind to Raw, Dynamite, and SmackDown with all the news of the day. Join now at postwrestlingcafe.com.